In today's video, we will be looking at creating our own morphs for our Daz Studio characters inside Blender, and I will also be covering a few tips and tricks regarding morphing inside Blender. So here we are inside Daz Studio, and I have my Genesis 8 male basic character here, and this is the person we're going to use to create our morph for. So before we actually export our character into sculpting mode inside Blender, we need to make a few alterations before we do that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to remove the eyelashes. So I generally remove the eyelashes. If you export your character with the eyelashes, you'll get a horrible error message when you try to import into Daz Studio your morph. It just won't like it because there's extra geometry there and it doesn't know how to handle it. So the easiest thing to do is just to delete the eyelash. I find it much more easier to do that. So right click, delete the eyelashes. The next thing we need to do is remove all the maps. So Genesis 8 male. We're going to use a shader mixer here. So if you don't have this, you can right click and add pane and then do shader mixer. Obviously I've already got it. Shader mixer, you'll see here. So we've got a shader mixer. We've got to go to the surfaces, select our Genesis 8 male here and then click apply. So we're going to remove all the maps and it's just going to basically have the Daz default material. This is it. This is it. When we go back to our viewport, it looks like this. So it should look all grey. Excellent. The next thing we need to do is go to the parameters, go to Genesis 8 male, go to general, go to mesh resolution, and resolution level, we've got to put it to base. The way it works is that you need to export with base because we are not published artists for Daz Studio. So that's why we need to export with base. I think if you're a published artist, you may have to correct me if someone is a published artist. I believe if you're a published artist, you could export using the high resolution method straight away into ZBrush, and then you can start doing your sculpting from there. But obviously because we're taking to Blender, we need to play by a different set of rules. So we've got rid of the eyelashes, we have changed the shading to basic, no maps, and we've changed the resolution level to base. We are good to go. So now let's export. Make sure our character is selected, just say male is selected here. We go to file, go to export. Give it a name. Already got one here, so I'm going to use this one, Gen 8 basic male. Do not save it on your desktop like I do. Make sure you save it in a proper area. So I'm going to save it. Yes, I'm going to save over that. Okay, so this is the most important section here. So as you can see, I've got a Blender export here. This is a preset I've created myself. I'll show you how I created that right now. We click here and we choose Daz Studio, and then the scale we just set to 1%. That's all it is. That's all my preset is. And then all I've done is clicked on save preset. I've given it a name, Blender export, and clicked OK. So that's all I've done. So if I click on here, right, you'll see that nothing will change. Blender export, apart from this section here, everything else is exactly as it was. So the reason why we do this is because the scaling is messed up from Daz Studio and Blender. And this is I think the most effective method to getting our character in there, into Blender, and then obviously it is at a size that is respectable. If you don't use the right settings, then your character in Blender is like huge. It looks like a giant. It's ridiculous. So these are the I think are the best options. But if someone can correct me, I'm more than happy to take any suggestions on board. So all we need to do now is just click accept, and now that's saved. So let's pop over to Blender now and start the morphing. So here we are in Blender, something I thought I'd never say in this YouTube channel, but I'm saying it, and I'm using version 2.83. So that's the version I'm using. So if you're using a version that's slightly higher up or lower down, just take that into consideration because I think the user interface has changed a lot from 2.8 to the previous versions. So I'll say it straight away, right away, I am not a professional at Blender whatsoever. I am a noob, and I'm happy to say that. And there are like 1,000,001 shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts in Blender, and the only one I do know is when I click on this cube here, I click on X here, it brings up this lovely menu, I press enter and there goes that cube. So that's the only thing I've learned regarding shortcuts. There are 1,000,001 shortcuts, so I'm still learning at the moment, and I'll do the best I can with what I'm trying to show you. So enough of that, let's actually import our character. So file, import, wavefront OBJ. Go to my desktop, there is my character, my OBJ file, click on that. So the most important setting you need to remember when you're importing a character from Daz Studio into Blender is this geometry here. We're not going to use split, we're going to use keep vertex order and polygroups, tick that. Now you can create a preset. So by clicking the plus here, put your preset in. I just call it Daz to Blender on mine and click OK. It just stops you from worrying about changing this all the time. All you need to do now is you just go to the preset here, do that preset, and there you go. Very straightforward. So that's what I've done. I just created a preset. Click the import OBJ and our character will appear here. So zoom in using the mouse wheel. Use our middle mouse button to navigate around here. And we can use a shift to go up and down, left and right to go across. So again, I'm not going to go through anything regarding Blender in terms of navigation. I highly recommend you check out all the million tutorials there are on YouTube that can help you with the navigation inside Blender. So we click on our character here and then we go to object mode and we choose sculpt mode. And there are all the lovely sculpting tools here. So a lot we can do. I'm not going to go through any of the sculpting tools. That is not my expertise whatsoever. There are 2 YouTube channels that I've watched. Videos that I've watched. I'll put the link in the description down below. Make sure you check out those. They're going to help you out in terms of how to, what each sculpting tool does. And what you'll notice is that in the tutorial, you're only going to end up using about 5 to really do the sculpting. Okay, so before we begin the sculpting, let's go over the most important areas to consider before you start sculpting. So let me just zoom in here. Let me put on the viewport wireframe. There we go. All right, let me zoom in a bit more. Right. So the first area you need to consider is this area here, right where the eyelids are, these here. This is what Daz Studio uses to know where to place the eyelashes. If you do too much geometry, messing about, too much sculpting around this area, you are gonna mess up the eyelashes. So be very mindful when you are sculpting to stay away from this area. It's very important you are very careful with this area. So you can sculpt around it, no problem with that. You can sculpt right around this area, no issue whatsoever with that. Just don't go and do it across this area here. Stay away from this area. So you can start from, say, this area, do sculpting here. Just stay away from this area here. Very important. The next area to consider is the mouth. Now the lips, you can go kind of crazy on this. It's not as bad as the eyelashes, but don't go too crazy because otherwise the expressions you use in Daz Studio are going to look a bit weird. So you can increase the lip size, you can make them thinner, fatter, no problem with that. Just don't make it where the lips are non-existent, and then otherwise the expression inside Daz Studio are going to look very strange. The next one to consider is, if I get my navigation right, is the back of the neck here. Very important because obviously our neck movements inside Daz Studio, the rigging, is very closely related to the back of the neck here. So don't go crazy here. Don't add too much mass. Otherwise you're going to have to create a lot of corrective morphs when it comes to using your character inside Daz Studio. So the next area to consider is, oh, just lost a bit more navigation there. Hold on a second. There we go. Next one is the shoulders here. So be very mindful again. Too much geometry here. Too much sculpting, too much mass here is going to cause issues. The next one here is under the armpits. Too much here is going to cause issues as well. And then the other bits are the joints. So anywhere there's a joint, be very mindful when you're sculpting. So around here, the crease here of the elbow here, the knees here, back of the knee, very careful. You can sculpt around it, no problem. Just be mindful when you're sculpting on it. And again here as well, the ankle joint, these joints here as well. Be very mindful when you're doing that as well. And the other areas to consider are the fingernails and the toenails. So the toenails and the fingernails, be very mindful, a lot of geometry here. So the way I would do the workflow is I would literally do the big movements first. So for example, if you're going to do big things like the sculpting on the face, do that first. And the little areas such as near the eyelids, the mouth, the fingernails, do those last because they're going to take a lot more time. So it's up to you how you want to do it. Or you can do the reverse, do the fingernails first or the lips first, but just remember, do one thing at a time. Don't do too much in one go. And the other suggestion I recommend is that do 2 separate morphs. So do 2 separate morphs. So do a head morph, export it, start with the base again, do a body morph, export it. So now you have 2. Don't do one big morph. So don't do head and do the body and then export it as one. Not a good idea. Always do separate morphs. Just because you can always combine those morphs inside Daz Studio anyway. So very important. I think that's a better workflow than doing one whole big morph. So one more last thing just before you begin sculpting. is that we have this option here, Dyn Topology, which is up here as well. And you don't want to use this whatsoever. We don't want to use Dyn Topology. We don't want to add any more topology, and we certainly don't want to take away anything. If we add anything or take away anything, then what happens is your importing to DAZSTUDIO won't work. It's very fickle. DAZSTUDIO is that you can move it around, you can sculpt it, no problem. But if as soon as you start adding topology or taking away, then DAZSTUDIO is like, I'm not having it. So be very mindful of that as well. So I've used Hexagon, and I find Blender actually a lot easier to use in terms of sculpting, morphing. One of the things I do like about Blender straight away is the symmetry mode. We're already in symmetry mode, which is really cool. So as you can see, I'm doing anything I do on the right is going to happen on the left. Anything I do on the left is going to happen on the right. So really cool if you want symmetrical things. If you want to remove that, you've got the option here, the X here. I take that off, and now I'm in asymmetrical mode. So anything I do on the right side or left side, or anything I do anyway, is not going to use symmetry. So really cool. So I do like that about Blender straight away. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a bit of morphing, so really bad morphing, and then sculpting rather. And then I'm going to show you how to import your sculpt, your morph into DAZSTUDIO, and then we're going to do a bit more details regarding that. Okay, so I finished my sculpting there. Very happy with that. Not the best in the world, but what can you do? So now we need to do is export it. So make sure our character is selected here in the scene collection tab, here the scene collection area, and we go to file, we go to export, and we go to wavefront OBJ. So I'm going to save it in my Blender folder here I've got here, and I will just save it as, we'll save it as number 3 here, Gen 8 male face morph 3. Right, so the most important options are these when you're exporting. Make sure selection only is ticked. Make sure objects as OBJ is ticked. So as OBJ objects, that is ticked. Scale, we want to change to 100. Okay, and the reason why we're doing that is because of the scale change we made when we went from DAZSTUDIO to exporting it DAZSTUDIO to now we're going to export it, recorrect that scale that we just changed when we were exporting in DAZSTUDIO earlier on in the tutorial. So in geometry, we want to make sure these are selected as well. Polygroups, and keep vertex order. So we can normally remove right materials, but I'm going to leave that on. And again, you can set this as a preset. So with the plus button here, you can give it a name and click OK and set your preset, which I've already done. So you'll see here, if I can show it, the presets. I'll just call it Daz. And it's basically the exact same settings I've just shown you here when we do export OBJ. Okay, so that's exported. So we're going to go back into DAZSTUDIO and we're going to import the morph. So here we are back in DAZSTUDIO. I've got my original Genesis character without the original character, so it's got the eyelashes already on. So when you want to import your morph, you want to make sure you have the original character with all the mats on and all the original settings. So make sure it's selected. This is a male. We're going to go here to edit. We're going to go to object, Morph Loader Pro. Now the settings we need in here are the exact same settings here, DAZSTUDIO. So because we did all the corrective stuff with the exporting in Blender, we don't have to worry about any of the settings. We just choose the DAZSTUDIO. Very simple, very straightforward. And here we just choose more files and Blender, and this is the one we created, the one I created, Morph 3. Click open. So we just need to expand this setting here. So one of the most important settings in here, there's a number of important settings, but the one that you really need to be concerned about is this one here, reverse deformations, and click yes. So I'm going to right click on that and do yes. And the reason why I choose that is because you're telling DAZSTUDIO that I want you to only keep the changes that I made in this OBJ that I created. So this OBJ, this this face morph that I created, I only want you to keep that change. Do not change anything else. So if there's anything inside here that's changed, I don't want you to keep that. Just keep this change here. And we do accept. And then you should get this message, creating morph successfully. Now, if you get a message here, I can't remember, I think it's like a blue error message here. That means you changed something in the geometry in Blender. You'll need to go and redo your morph again. Something's wrong with that morph that you tried to do, the sculpt that you tried to do. So that's why you should get this message like 10 times out of 10. If you do correctly, you'll get this message. So we click OK. We go to parameters, we expand that, we go to morphs, and here it is, Gen Male Face Morph 3, and we expand that slider, and there we go. He's got puffy cheeks, and we can see that in NVIDIA iRay. Zoom in a bit there. There we go. And he looks completely different, and he's got a bit of, you can see now the actual morph here. You can see the kind of, let me just show you, the kind of puffy bags there for his eyes. So you can do quite a bit. So as long as you stay away from these eyelids here, you can do a lot. So you don't mess up the eyelashes. You can do quite a lot. You can make the ridge here more if you want to, more pronounced. So there's a lot you can do with morphing. We've changed the nose as well. So remember, this is the original here. This is what the original male looks like. Then when we add the morph, this is what it looks like. So you can see when we add the hair and everything and change the eyes, he looks like a completely different person, a completely unique person. So that's really cool. So one of the things I want to cover as well is once you start to create your morphs, including the body morphs, and you start changing your characters a lot in terms of the facial expressions, the lips, when you start to go a lot more detail, we're gonna need to apply the bone changes. So one thing we need to do is go to my tool settings here, go to joint editor. You can see all the bones here. These are all bones. These are all the bones, the rigging, that's already there. Now, if you've made a lot of changes to the shape of your character, especially when you increase the size of your character, maybe you made it more bulky, or maybe you trim down the character in certain areas, you're going to have to update the rigging. And it's very easy to do that. So the way we do that is once we go to our joint editor, you just right click anywhere in the viewport. We go to edit and we go to adjust rigging to shape. And then you just make sure everything should be selected, which is kind of cool. Make sure adjust orientation is selected as well. And do accept. Okay. So probably see a little bit move there, a little bit of the movement. Did you see that? A little bit of movement there. So a little bit of the facial structure change because I added a bit more of the morphing there. But especially when you're doing big changes to body parts, you're going to need to do that rigging. And for that rigging to stay in place now, we need to use ERC. So the rigging to stay in place for this morph. So we need to go to edit mode. We right click. Edit mode, you'll see this here, and then we right click here and then we go to ERC freeze. So what this does now is this is all the changes that have been made, with our morph. Now obviously it didn't do all the changes. These are all to do with the mouth here, so the areas that we changed, so all the little values that changed when we did our morphing, and we do accept. So after using that ERC freeze, basically when we go to 0 now, the bones will follow. So when we move, the bones will follow here. You can see it being stretched. If you have a look, if we zoom in, you see these areas being stretched now because it's following. You can see now it's following. There we go. So very small movements in our facial area there, but it's very necessary to do that ERC freeze. So now what we need to do is save our morph. We go to File, go to Save As, Support Asset and Morph Asset. I normally leave the asset directory as the same. You can change that if you wish to do so. You can add a vendor name if you wish to do so and a product name. Obviously if you were selling this, you would do that. You would add a vendor name and a product name. And then the morph here, you would click, as it's saying male, you would click on morphs, morph loader, and there's our morph. Click that and do accept. So what that means is whenever I load in a Genesis 8 male character, the morph will be in here, in the parameters, in the morphs here. This is why you see the pull cheeks morph. This is the morph that I created with the deformer tutorial, very old tutorial. So as you can see when I apply it, you'll see the cheeks going out. That's still with deformers. Obviously, probably won't use deformers anymore since we can know how to use Blender to create our morphs. An additional thing I want to cover right now as well is what if I wanted to add some extra additional details to this particular morph. So for example, we go back into Blender and I want to go back into my sculpt mode and say, actually, I want to give this guy puffier cheeks. So let me give him more puffier cheeks. Just out of interest. Let me just turn around, give him a bit more. Go a bit crazy, shall we? That'll do. Just for purposes. There we go. Let's give him a bit more here. There we go. There we go. Okay. So I'm happy with that. I gave more puffier cheeks. So I'm going to export that. File, export. I'm going to export, save over the same OBJ file. Make sure my settings are correct, which got my preset there, so I don't have to worry about this. Okay. Go back into Daz Studio. And I'm going to do the same thing. Make sure my character is selected. I'm going to go to edit. So now I'm going to overwrite the settings here because I was going to add the extra information to that morph. So edit, object, morph loader pro. We got to choose morph files, same morph, 3. Now the extra option we need to choose is reverse deformations. Yes, obviously. Overwrite existing. So this is the one where we're going to overwrite the existing existing morph here. We're going to add the additional options that we've just done to our morph now. So here I want to choose, right click here and choose deltas only. Okay, deltas. I want to update the deltas on here. So I do accept. Okay, and you'll see it's got puffier cheeks. So as I go back, puffier cheeks. Again, I'll have to use the joint. So I'll have to go to the joint tool. And I'll have to update the joints. So edit, just bring it to shape. Orientation, sorry, click accept. So we did the joints, which the joints have been corrected, and we need to do the ERC freeze again. So right click, over here, still in edit mode, mind you, we go to ERC freeze and we do accept. So that's going to do the ERC freeze there. So there you go. There's my morph working as expected. Let's get rid of that there. So there you go, working as expected at 0%. There he is, and then 100%. There he is as well. Again, we'll need to save our morph asset. So file, save as, and sport asset, morph asset, and then save it again. Sorry, morphs. There it is, just to make those changes stick. So every time I load this character, that'll be the new morph there. Don't forget to leave a comment down below as well. Let me know what you think of this tutorial. If you have anything else to add on this tutorial, please do, because the more we learn, the more we can learn together, the better we will get at our craft. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button and that wonderful notification bell as well, so you don't miss out any more cool videos like this that are going to help you on your journey. And don't forget to check out these videos here on the right. They're going to help you on your journey as well. And I'll see you in next week's video.